So what if the way most of us think about gender is, well, just all wrong? Today we're going to dive into some of the fascinating ideas from the collection Trans Lives in a Globalizing World. We'll look at how gender is being understood, fought for, and totally redefined on a global stage. Let's jump right in.
I want you to think about your own gender for just a second. Is it something you just are, an essential part of you right from birth? Or is it something you do, a set of actions and things you've learned to perform every single day? That question, right there, is really at the heart of everything we're about to explore.
So that second idea, that gender is something you do, is our first big concept, gender as a performance. Now that doesn't mean it's fake or that you're just putting on an act. What it means is that our shared ideas of what's masculine and what's feminine are built and reinforced by our actions over and over and over again every single day.
And there's a name for these actions. Sociologist Irving Goffman called them gender displays. Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're basically handed a script. We're taught how to walk, how to talk, how to dress, and how to interact in ways that signal man or woman. These aren't some kind of natural instinct. They're learned performances that help society make sense of who we are.
Then you have philosopher Judith Butler, who took this idea and just ran with it. She argued that if we are the ones creating gender through our actions, well, then we can also be the ones to uncreate it. By challenging those unspoken rules we perform every day, what she famously called gender trouble, we can start to see that the whole male/female binary isn't nearly as solid as it looks.
So, the big takeaway here is this. Gender isn't some static fact about you. It's an active, ongoing process. It's something we're all doing all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Okay, so if gender is a personal performance, what happens when that performance hits the public stage? When someone's identity doesn't quite fit the expected script, how do things like legal and medical systems respond? This is where a personal truth becomes a massive political fight for recognition.
And you can really see the momentum building globally. It started with huge foundational ideas like the Yoga Carter Principles back in 2006, which basically said self-determination is a basic human right. That paved the way for major legal victories in places like India and Malta. But maybe the biggest shift of all came in 2018 from the highest health authority in the world.
This whole global fight really boils down to two competing models. On one hand, you have the self-declaration model, like in Malta. It's based on dignity and your basic right to define who you are. But on the other hand, there's the medical model. This approach treats gender identity like a medical condition that needs a doctor's stamp of approval, often requiring invasive surgeries and basically framing a person's core identity as a problem that needs to be solved.
And for decades, that was the official global stance. Think about that. The World Health Organization's main diagnostic manual, the one used everywhere, literally classified being transgender under the chapter on mental disorders. This fueled so much stigma and created these huge barriers to healthcare and just basic acceptance.
But in 2018, everything changed. The WHO officially moved gender incongruence out of the mental disorders chapter. The organization said it loud and clear. The evidence shows being trans is not a mental illness, and that was absolutely huge, a monumental step in destigmatizing trans identities all over the world.
But even with that big change from the WHO, the legacy of that old medical model leaves behind some massive real-world barriers. In systems that still demand surgery for legal recognition, the financial cost is a huge one. This staggering figure, over $50,000, is for just one of several potential surgeries. It puts authentic legal recognition completely out of reach for countless people.
All right, let's zoom out to the big global picture. In our super-connected world, you'd think globalization would be a massive win for trans people. But it turns out it's actually a double-edged sword, creating both new opportunities and, believe it or not, new dangers.
And here's the paradox at the heart of it. The internet connects trans communities in ways that were impossible before, giving them a global voice. But that voice isn't equal. The stories that get the most airtime, mostly from North America and Europe, can end up drowning out and even erasing local ways of understanding gender that are sometimes centuries old.
And this chart really shows you why that is. The imbalance is just stark. The vast majority of global media is made in North America and Europe. And what that means is that their stories, their standards, and their ideas about identity get beamed across the entire planet, and they become the default for how everyone everywhere is supposed to understand gender.
To make this really concrete, let's look at a specific example, the Hydras of South Asia. Now, the Hydra identity isn't some modern Western import. It has deep ancient roots in the region's culture and religion, and it's now legally recognized as its own distinct third gender in countries like India.
But here's where that double-edged sword cuts. Global media often comes in and just flattens this unique identity, reframing it through a Western lens. Suddenly, Hijras just become transgender, and all their specific cultural and political struggles get swallowed up into a generic conversation about transgender rights. It's a subtle but really powerful form of cultural imperialism.
And there's a word for this. You've probably heard it: appropriation. It's when a dominant culture takes the stories and experiences of a marginalized group and kind of repackages them for its own use. This isn't about appreciation. It's about power. It's about who gets to control the story.
You know, this whole dynamic isn't new. Not at all. It has deep, deep roots in the colonial era. That's when European powers basically rolled across the globe and forcibly imposed their own rigid male/female binary on societies everywhere, erasing countless indigenous forms of gender variance. They brought in laws like the British Criminal Tribes Act, which targeted hijras, that criminalized anyone who didn't fit neatly into their boxes. And that legacy, that power imbalance, is still shaping our globalized world today.
All right, so we've gone from the personal to the political, all the way to the global. So where does that leave us? What's next? What does the future actually look like for trans people in our very complicated, interconnected world?
So let's quickly recap the three big ideas we've talked about. First, that gender isn't just a fixed fact, but a social performance. Second, that the global fight for recognition is slowly but surely shifting from a medical model to one of self-declaration and dignity. And third, that globalization is this tricky double-edged sword, offering incredible visibility, but also posing a very real risk of erasure.
And that leaves us with this final, crucial question posed by the book's authors. As we face all these growing global challenges, the future is going to be a hard-fought battle between those with power and those without. So the question for all of us to really think about is, where will trans lives, in all their incredible diversity, figure in the struggles that lie ahead?